This morning's gospel, we're asked two questions. Who is Jesus? And what does it mean to follow him? In the gospel, we have the classic story where Jesus says, "Who do people say that I am?" And the disciples respond, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, some say a great prophet. But then he asks the important question. He says, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answers correctly. He says, "You are the Christ." In the Gospel of Matthew, there's a very similar exchange. And after Peter answers correctly, "You are the Christ," Jesus says to him, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." And he makes Peter the head of his new church. This doesn't happen in today's gospel. In today's gospel, it's not very positive. In fact, we are told that Jesus rebukes Peter because Peter has tried to change Jesus' mind about what he should do. Jesus says to him, "Get behind me, Satan." A very severe rebuke. Why does he rebuke Peter? Because Peter answered right, but he didn't really understand what his answer meant. He didn't understand who Jesus was or what Jesus' mission was. Jesus explains to them he is going to have to suffer, he's going to be rejected, and he is going to have to die. And on the third day, he will be risen. But Peter doesn't want to hear that. Peter can't accept the concept of a suffering Jesus. And I think Peter is much like us. I think that we would much prefer to have a Christ that is majestic, triumphant, beautiful, one who removes our suffering. Instead, we are offered a Christ who is broken, bruised, crucified, who will ultimately rise on the third day. We get the suffering servant. We cannot understand who Jesus is unless we accept the centrality of the cross and the concept of suffering. Jesus says, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me." Dan Berrigan has the famous comment that if you want to follow Jesus, you had better look good in wood. And the Japanese Catholic novelist Shisako Endo added that Jesus is one who suffers with us. So Jesus not only suffers for us, but Jesus suffers with us. So to come to know Jesus, who Jesus is, we have to understand what suffering is. To understand who Jesus is, we need to look at his life. Where did Jesus locate himself? Where was he to be found? We see that Jesus was with the poor, the outcast, the suffering, the sorrowing, the despised. Is that the Jesus we follow? Where is the cross today? Where is Jesus to be found today? We see that Jesus and the cross in all those who suffer, in all those who are crucified today. We see Jesus in those who suffer from sexual abuse. We see Jesus in the war-torn countries where people are suffering in Afghanistan, Syria, Nicaragua. We see Jesus with those victims of the flood devastated in the Carolinas and in Asia. We see Jesus with the refugees on our own border and the refugees throughout the world. We see Jesus with the young woman trying to make the difficult decision whether to keep her child or not, without the father, without her family, and without much support from society. We see Jesus with those who are persecuted in the Middle East, in China, Africa, throughout the world. Jesus is present wherever there is suffering, wherever the crucifixion continues today. So who do we say that Jesus is? And how do we follow him? St. James, in the second reading, gives us an interesting insight. He says, "It is not enough for us just to proclaim who Jesus is. Our lives must also proclaim it. What good is it," he says, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works? Our lives, the way we live, proclaim what we believe about Jesus. James is very practical. He says, if a brother or sister has nothing to wear and has no food for the day, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat well," but you do not give them the necessities of the body, what good is it? So also faith, of itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Faith, if it does not have works, is dead. We must act as if we believe in what we say about Jesus. Daniel Berrigan said about Dorothy Day, she lived as if the gospel were true. We must do more than simply testify to the truth that Jesus is the Christ. Our lives must proclaim it. When people look at us, are they able to see who Jesus is? Do our lives answer the question, who do you say that I am? If we wish to proclaim Jesus through our lives, the cross must be central. Again, Jesus says, whoever wishes to come after me must deny themselves, pick up their cross, and follow me. And while it might be too much to ask that we embrace suffering, we at least can embrace a suffering world. And the surprise is that in doing so, we are set free. We find meaning and ultimate joy and happiness. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. And so Jesus asks us this morning, who do you say that I am? What do our lives say? How do we answer?